True Grit gave John Wayne the only Oscar of his life and buried almost everyone who helped him win it. 15 of the 16 people in this film are gone. The last of them died 6 months ago. One is still alive, and she never won anything. 1. John Wayne did not own the story that finally won him an Academy Award. His own company, Batjack Productions, chased the rights to the Charles Portis novel and lost them to the producer Hal Wallis, who paid $300,000. Rooster Cogburn was the fat, one-eyed, hard-drinking deputy marshal who put the reins in his teeth and charged. Wayne had worked nearly 40 years with one acting nomination behind him, for Sands of Iwo Jima. On April 7, 1970, Barbara Streisand handed him Best Actor over Dustin Hoffman, Richard Burton, and Peter O'Toole. He knew exactly what it was, and he said that if he had known, he would have put the patch on 35 years earlier. 3 marriages, all to Latina women, and every one of them ended before he did. Josephine Saenz gave him 4 children before the divorce. Esperanza Bauer came and went. Pilar Palette married him in 1954, gave him 3 more children, and when they separated in the 1970s, he never signed the papers. He stayed married to her, at a distance, to the end. That end came on June 11, 1979, at UCLA Medical Center, aged 72. Stomach cancer took him. Lung cancer had already cost him his entire left lung and 2 ribs, and he had called it the Big C out loud, in an era when a star hit a diagnosis like a criminal record. His grave at Pacific View Memorial Park in Corona del Mar was left deliberately unmarked for 20 years because the family feared vandals and sightseers. A bronze marker and a granite bench finally appeared in 1999. Cogburn owned the whole territory. Wayne could not even buy the book. Second on the list is Kim Darby, handed the biggest Western role of the decade only after the industry circled 8 other women first. Catherine Ross, Tuesday Weld, Sandra Locke, and John Wayne's own daughter Isa were all considered. Mia Farrow was actually cast and then walked, after Robert Mitchum warned her about the director, Henry Hathaway, and Hal Wallis refused to swap him for Roman Polanski. Mattie Ross was the Arkansas girl who out-argued grown men and flatly refused to be sent home. She was 21, playing 14, and she played it without a shred of cuteness. Born Deborah Zerby in Los Angeles, she came out of a professional dance act, and her father nicknamed her Darby because he thought it would make a good stage name. The marriage that shaped that year was breaking while the cameras rolled. She married the actor James Stacey in 1968 and was divorced by the time the film opened, and their daughter, Heather Elias, had been born weeks before filming began. A second marriage to James Westmoreland was over in under 2 months. Her third, to William Tennant, ended too, and she never tried again. Nothing that size ever came to her again. Don't Be Afraid of the Dark and Better Off Dead kept her name alive, and then she went into teaching, spending roughly 17 years teaching film acting and directing, much of it at UCLA Extension. She is 79 now, living quietly somewhere in the Los Angeles area, out of public view. On screen, Mattie Ross collected every debt she was owed. Kim Darby carried the picture at 21, watched the man beside her take the only Oscar of his life out of their scenes, and went home with a nomination she did not win. Number 3, Glen Campbell, stood up in June 2011 and told the world he had Alzheimer's disease. Then he did the thing nobody does. He went back out on the road with it, well over 100 shows, teleprompters in front of him and his own children behind him, until a last concert in Napa. La Boeuf was the preening Texas Ranger in fringed buckskin who talked bigger than he shot. He was the 7th of 12 children born to Arkansas sharecroppers in Pike County, and his father bought him a $5 Sears guitar when he was 4. By the 1960s, he was one of the most recorded session guitarists in America, playing behind the Beach Boys, Elvis Presley, and Frank Sinatra. Presley was wanted for La Boeuf first and lost it when his people demanded billing above Wayne and Darby. Campbell said Wayne and Wayne's daughter came backstage at one of his shows and offered him the part. He was paid $100,000, 1/10 of Wayne's fee, and the reviewers made him the punching bag. 4 marriages and 9 children, and it was the last one that mattered. Kimberly Woolen married him in 1982 and stayed 35 years, and when the diagnosis came, it was Kim and their 3 children who put him back on stage, with Cal on drums, Shannon on guitar, and Ashley on banjo. He died on August 8, 2017, in a long-term care facility in Nashville, aged 81. They buried him in a private family service in the Campbell Family Cemetery at Billstown, in Pike County, Arkansas, near where he was born. Nashville did not keep him, and Los Angeles never got him back. He went home to the sharecroppers' ground. Reviewers called him the worst thing in an Oscar-winning film. 46 years later, the Academy nominated him for a song he sang while losing the ability to remember singing it. The next man on this list shouted an insult at the biggest star in the world when nobody knew his name, and then outlived him by 47 years. 4. Robert Duvall is the reason this cast list changed 6 months ago. He died on the evening of Sunday, February 15, 2026, at his home in Middleburg, Virginia, aged 95, with his wife Luciana beside him. No cause was made public. Lucky Ned Pepper was the outlaw boss who faced Cogburn across an open meadow and was not remotely impressed. An admiral's son, he served as a private first class in the United States Army, repairing radios at Camp Gordon, and turned his discharge into a GI Bill place under Sanford Meisner at the neighborhood playhouse in New York. Gene Hackman and James Caan sat in those classes, and he roomed with Dustin Hoffman, the man John Wayne would beat for the Oscar. What the Academy did to him afterwards was a long, patient tease. 6 nominations across 50 years, among them The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, The Great Santini, The Apostle, and The Judge, and exactly 1 win for Tender Mercies. There were 4 marriages and no children. Luciana Pedraza was 41 years younger and married him in 2005, and that was the one that held, right through to the last night. Asked once why there were no children, he said he supposed he was shooting blanks. There is no grave to visit. He was cremated, and his family said that, following his own instruction, no formal service would be held. What they asked instead was that people watch a good film, tell stories around a table, or drive out into the countryside. Ned Pepper met a man he could not beat and rode away from him. Duvall walked into that meadow as an unknown, buried the whole generation that made him, and left instructions that nobody was to gather. 5th is Dennis Hopper, and the director who hired him for this film had already destroyed his career once. On From Hell to Texas in 1958, the young actor refused direction, and Henry Hathaway broke him with take after take and then made sure he did not work in features. Hopper spent years exiled to television until John Wayne pulled him back for The Sons of Katie Elder. The man who ruined him and the man who rescued him are both in this picture. Moon was the frightened young outlaw in the dugout who talked too much and got a blade for it. He stayed a painter and a photographer his whole life. The same year this film opened, he co-wrote and directed Easy Rider, which detonated the American film industry and earned him an Academy Award nomination for its screenplay. Another followed for Hoosiers. He won neither. 5 marriages, and one of them lasted 8 days. Michelle Phillips married him at the end of October in 1970 and was gone by the 8th of November. Brooke Hayward had given him 8 years and a daughter. The last marriage broke in public while he was dying, fought through the courts in his final months. Advanced prostate cancer was diagnosed in October 2009, and it moved into his bones. On March 26, 2010, visibly frail and needing help to stand, he was walked onto Hollywood Boulevard to accept his star. He had waited his whole career for it, and he got it with weeks to spare. Death found him at home in Venice on May 29, aged 74. They took him to Jesus Nazareno Cemetery in Ranchos de Taos, a small Catholic burial ground in the New Mexico town he had loved since Easy Rider was shot there. He lies in the desert far from any studio. Moon gave up his gang to save himself. Hopper gave up nothing, waited out the man who blacklisted him, and released the film that ended the era this one belonged to. Number 6 is Jeff Corey, and Hollywood took 12 years of his working life away from him. Called before the House Committee on Un-American Activities in 1951, he took the Fifth Amendment, refused to name one person, and mocked the committee by critiquing the testimony of witnesses who had gone in before him. The town shut its doors, and he did not work in a film again until 1962. Tom Chaney was the drifter who shot Mattie Ross's father and was hunted across the Indian Territory for it. With 3 daughters to feed and no work coming, he took a speech therapy degree at UCLA and opened an acting class at home. That class became one of the most important rooms in American screen acting. James Dean sat in it. So did Jack Nicholson, Kirk Douglas, Jane Fonda, and Robin Williams. The industry that refused to employ him spent 12 years sending him its future. Born Arthur Zwirling in Brooklyn, he came up on the New York stage in the 1930s and served in the Navy through the Second World War before the hearings found him. He married Hope Victorson in 1938 and stayed married to her 64 years, one of the longest marriages anyone in this cast managed. They raised 3 daughters in a house on Blue Water Drive in Malibu, an open house for writers, actors, and directors, and he kept his acting studio there until he died. 6 days after his 88th birthday, he had a fall at home, and on August 16, 2002, in Santa Monica, the complications killed him. Days before that fall, he was still walking out from Blue Water Drive to the headland at Point Dume. They cremated him, and his ashes were given to family or to a friend. There is no plot, no marker, and no public place to stand. A man who spent 12 years being erased from the record has nowhere public to be found. Chaney murdered a father over a small amount of money. Corey would not sell out one colleague, and it cost him a decade. Jeff Corey lost 12 years and never gave up a single name. Tell me in the comments which of these lives you had no idea about. Coming up next is a national champion athlete who was cast over and over again as a coward. 7. Strother Martin won the National Junior Springboard Diving Championship at 17, and that is how he got into pictures. He served in the Navy in the Second World War as a swimming instructor, then moved to Los Angeles and worked as a swimming extra. His screen career began underwater and uncredited, in a 1950 picture called The Damned Do Not Cry. Colonel Stonehill was the blustering horse trader whom a 14-year-old girl negotiated straight into the ground. Watch his face in that scene, and you can see a grown man work out in real time that he has been beaten by a child. No Academy Award nomination ever came his way, across a career built on unforgettable weasels and cowards. What he got instead was one line from Cool Hand Luke, the one about a failure to communicate, ranked 11th on the American Film Institute's list of the 100 greatest lines in film. Helen Mizels married him in 1967, the year before this film was shot. There were no children, and the marriage held for the 13 years he had left. Those years ended fast. On August 1, 1980, a heart attack killed him at Los Robles Regional Medical Center in Thousand Oaks, California, and he was 61. He had been working solidly right up to it, and had hosted Saturday Night Live only months before. Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills holds him, in the courts of remembrance. The published records disagree about which niche is his, a strange last joke on a man audiences could always place instantly and never quite name. Stonehill was the fool who lost to a girl. Martin was an athlete good enough to compete for a national title before he ever spoke a line on film. 8th on this roster, John Fiedler kept his private life so far out of view that after 60 years of work there is no marriage and no child recorded for him anywhere. That silence is the honest answer about him, and for a voice that millions knew, it is a strange one. Lawyer Daggett was the small, fussy attorney Mattie Ross kept threatening to set loose on everyone. Born in Platteville, Wisconsin, he served the last 2 years of the Second World War in the United States Navy, reaching Seaman First Class. New York theater came next, and then juror number 2 in 12 Angry Men, the timid bank clerk who finally finds a spine. The voice typecast him for life, and rather than fight it, he built everything on it. In 1968, the year this film was shot, Walt Disney heard him on television during work on Winnie the Pooh and The Blustery Day and picked him. He was the voice of Piglet from that year until 2005, 37 years of it, still doing it in the year he died. Cancer took him on June 25, 2005, aged 80, at the Lillian Booth Actors Home in Englewood, New Jersey, the charitable retirement home run by the Actors Fund. One day earlier, Paul Winchell, the voice of Tigger, had died. Piglet and Tigger went within 24 hours of each other. His body was cremated and the ashes were scattered on Long Island, New York. No cemetery holds him, and there is nothing anywhere with his name on it. Daggett was the threat a girl kept in her back pocket. Fiedler was a Navy seaman who came home from the Pacific and spent 37 years being the smallest, gentlest voice in children's cinema. And almost nobody who loved it learned his name. If you are enjoying this one, subscribing costs you nothing, and it keeps these cast stories coming every week. Number 9. Jeremy Slate joined the United States Navy at 16 and was barely 18 when his destroyer took part in the Normandy landings on June 6, 1944. Everything he did afterwards was an epilogue to that. Emmett Quincy was the outlaw who pinned his own partner's hand to a table to stop him talking. He came home and took an honors degree in English at St. Lawrence University in Canton, New York. Song lyrics were a sideline, among them one recorded by Tex Ritter and another by Glen Campbell, the man riding beside him in this picture. When Hollywood was slow to cast him, he made his own job, co-writing and starring in the biker film Hell's Angels 69. 3 weddings, and the first one was the long one. Beverly Van Wert stayed 18 years. The Tony-winning Broadway star Tammy Grimes lasted barely 12 months. Denise Mellinger married him in 2000 and was with him at the end. Of his 5 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters survived him. His steadiest work came last, 8 seasons, as Chuck Wilson on the ABC daytime drama One Life to Live, from 1979 to 1987, the longest run of his career. On Sunday, November 19, 2006, complications following surgery for esophageal cancer killed him at UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was 80. Where he lies is unknown. No cemetery, no cremation record, and no scattering location for Jeremy Slate appears in any traceable source, which is a strange silence for a man who was on the water off Normandy at 18. Quincy was the cold professional who silenced a man mid-sentence. Slate survived the largest invasion in history and finished his career playing a small-town businessman on a soap opera, for an audience that never had the faintest idea. The woman coming up next, alone among all of these people, has no fixed place on land at all. 10. Edith Atwater outlived her husband by exactly 1 year, and there was nobody else left in the house. The actor Kent Smith had married her in 1962 and stayed 23 years, until his death in 1985, and they had no children. Mrs. Floyd was the Fort Smith boarding house keeper who gave a bereaved child one safe room in town. Chicago-born and New York-made, she was a Broadway actress long before she was a film face, with roughly 20 New York productions between 1931 and 1951. The Man Who Came to Dinner was one of them. So were King Lear and Flahooley. Hollywood took all of that and converted it into landladies, aunts, and mothers. 2 earlier marriages came and went, to the actor Hugh Marlowe in the 1940s and to Joseph Allen in the early 1950s. Only the third one held. Cancer killed her on March 14, 1986, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, aged 74, a single year after Kent Smith died. Her body was cremated, and the ashes were scattered at sea. There is no cemetery, no plot, and no marker for her anywhere on land, which makes her the only member of this cast you cannot go and stand beside. The landlady gave a homeless girl an address. Atwater ended with none of her own. 11th, Alfred Ryder started acting at 8 years old and finished his life in a charity home for actors. Liver cancer took him on April 16, 1995, age 79, at the Lillian Booth Actors Home in Englewood, New Jersey, run by the Actors Fund. 10 years later, John Fiedler died in the same building. Both lawyers from this film ended their lives in one house in New Jersey. Goody was the defense attorney who cross-examined Rooster Cogburn in open court and took him apart. Born Alfred Jacob Korn in New York City, he grew up inside American radio, playing Molly Goldberg's son Sammy on The Goldbergs and Carl Neff on Easy Aces. He was a child star of a medium that no longer exists, and his sister was the actress Olive Deering. In 1958, he married Kim Stanley, and they divorced 6 years later. Stanley was twice nominated for an Academy Award and was regarded by other actors as one of the finest of the century, which made him, for a while, the husband in that house. Their daughter Lori became a California pediatrician and a child advocate, the one child of this cast who left acting behind entirely for medicine. Where his body went is not recorded. No cemetery, no cremation, and no scattering appears in any traceable source for Alfred Ryder. All that is documented is the building he died in, which is a hard thing to say about a man who was a household voice in America before he was old enough to drive. Goody won a courtroom fight against the most famous man in the world. Ryder died in a home funded by charity because the profession he gave his whole life to does not look after its own. The last name is number 12, James Westerfield, and he was the first of this company to die. 2 years and 3 months after the film opened, while it was still playing in second-run houses, a heart attack killed him in Woodland Hills on September 20th, 1971. He was 58 and still working. Judge Parker was the hanging judge of Fort Smith who tolerated his marshal because the territory needed killers. Nashville-born, he was a serious New York stage actor long before any studio wanted him, and he won 2 New York Drama Critics Circle Awards for supporting work, in The Mad Woman of Shy-Yo and in Detective Story. Hollywood took a man carrying 2 of the most respected notices in the American theater and gave him 30 years of one-scene parts on Gunsmoke, Perry Mason, The Andy Griffith Show, and The Rifleman. Frances Lansing, a former actress, married him in the 1950s. A second marriage to the actress Alice Faye, who worked as Faye Tracy, is reported to have run from 1962 until he died, though it is thinly documented. No children are recorded. He lies in San Fernando Mission Cemetery at Mission Hills in Los Angeles County, in Section B, Block 1113, Grave 9. It is the most precisely recorded resting place of anybody in this cast. Parker was the man who decided who hangs. Westerfield was the first man in that courtroom to go, gone at 58 with the ink barely dry on the reviews. An unmarked grave in Newport Beach for 20 years, a family plot in Arkansas, a Catholic graveyard in New Mexico, ashes on the open sea. One woman still here,